Now, there's no denying that audience members get extremely attached to their favourite characters. After all, we can spend years getting to know these people and then just one day, they're gone. And when they die, we feel an actual profound sense of loss. And you know what? We're not the only ones, because the actors themselves spend years in the headspace of their characters, and so it's little surprise that they're not always thrilled about them being killed off. So let's take a look at them today. This is WhatCulture.com, and these are actors who freaked out when their character died. Julie Benz had a panic attack. Dexter. Few TV deaths can claim to be as shocking as that of Dexter's wife Rita. At the end of Dexter's 4th season, out of nowhere she was murdered by the Trinity Killer as a final parting gift to Dexter. On an episode of Michael Rosenbaum's Inside of You podcast, Benz called Rita's death the worst thing that's ever happened to her as an actress, and that as soon as she sensed the news was coming, she launched into a panic attack. I found out 3 days before I started having a panic attack, and I called my manager at the time and I said, "Oh my god, I think they're killing me off." Benz added that when she met with the show's producers to have the news officially broken to her, she tried to rush through the meeting to keep herself in check, only for them to desire a longer conversation to properly process her exit, causing her to wind up bawling. And worse still, Benz had just come from the gym and so was likely feeling pretty tired and pretty sweaty, and then was told that she was getting the chop. She added, "All I could think about is the movie where this guy's getting broken up with when he's naked, forgetting Sarah Marshall. I don't have a shirt on and I'm losing my job. I felt so vulnerable. I was really upset. It was such a great family, and here you are being told, okay, we're still going to be getting together as a family, but you are on your own." It was really hard.
Jessica Alba was made to feel like her emotions weren't good enough. Rise of the Silver Surfer. It's not exactly difficult to understand why Jessica Alba felt so disheartened upon hearing from her Fantastic Four Rise of the Silver Surfer director Tim Story that her dying performance before being brought back to life was too real and too painful. If that wasn't enough, Story would then go on to tell his Sue Storm star, "Can you be prettier when you cry? Cry pretty, Jessica. And don't do that thing with your face, just make it flat, we can CGI the tears in." Disgusting notes that would ultimately lead to the Invisible Woman actor confessing to thinking, "F it, I don't care about this business anymore." This sort of despicable behavior eventually paved the way for Alba dealing with internal questions such as, am I not good enough? Are my instincts and my emotions not good enough? When in reality, she just had the misfortune of working with a director who didn't understand that humans don't actually have to be pretty in such heartbreaking circumstances, you big old mother.
Richard Madden sobbed during his flight home from the set. Game of Thrones. Now, we could write an entire list based solely on Game of Thrones actors who were left inconsolable by learning that they were next on the chopping block, no matter how much of a foregone conclusion it seemed on such a bloodthirsty show. Yet perhaps the actor who suffered the most unfortunate reaction to learning their on-screen death, well, that has to be Richard Madden, who played the King of the North himself, Robb Stark. Stark meets his brutal end in the show's single most infamous episode, The Reigns of Castamere. During the iconic Red Wedding, Robb is brutally murdered alongside his bannermen and members of his own family. To say that Madden didn't take the news well is quite the understatement indeed. Madden, still wearing his costume and covered in blood from the shoot, immediately left for the airport after filming and flew back home to London. During the flight, however, his emotions came fully boiling over. He said, "I sobbed and sobbed on that Friday. I was hysterical, actually. I was so exhausted, I cried all the way home. I was sobbing and covered in blood. I looked like I'd murdered someone and got on that flight." And yet that was nothing compared to the fan reaction to the Red Wedding, which remains one of the biggest collective outpourings of grief for any TV character of the last decade.
And Thandiwe Newton wasn't happy with Val not being given an open-ended fall. Solo: A Star Wars Story. Assembling the likes of Woody Harrelson, Thandiwe Newton, and many more reliable talents around Alden Ehrenreich's iteration of a young Han Solo seemed like a surefire way of guaranteeing a ton of quality performances across the board in 2016's Solo: A Star Wars Story. Only before fans could really embrace or get to truly know Newton's Val in particular, one of the first real standout black female characters in Star Wars history was quickly dispatched during a rather dramatic mission gone wrong. As it goes, this heartbreaking development wasn't actually a part of the original scripts, with Newton later revealing to Inverse, in the scripts she wasn't killed. It happened during filming and it was much more just to do with the time we had to do the scenes. You don't kill off the first black woman to ever have a real role in a Star Wars movie, like, are you effing joking?
Laurie Holden felt like she got shot. The Walking Dead. According to Laurie Holden, when she initially signed up to play Andrea in The Walking Dead, she had an 8-year deal which would have eventually made her one of the show's longest tenured characters, and so it was quite the surprise to Holden when she was suddenly killed off in just season 3. Holden, believing her job to be secure for the next 5 years, was even in the process of buying a house in Atlanta where the show was filmed. When she got the call saying that she was being axed, she said of the experience, "Well, I had an 8-year deal. I was supposed to be there until the end. I was supposed to end up with Rick. I was supposed to save Woodbury on a horse, and I was buying a house in Atlanta. I got the call at 10 o'clock the night before, while I was shooting, from the showrunner who was no longer a part of The Walking Dead, saying that they couldn't write the episode and that he was killing my character. So we all got the script, everybody on the set was sobbing, I felt like I got shot. None of it was supposed to happen the way it did." Holden added that she felt like it was a mistake to deviate from her arc in the comics, feeling that having her enter a relationship with the villainous governor was complete and utter nonsense. Though she was understandably upset at having her life unexpectedly uprooted in the middle of a lucrative gig, Holden is at least more pragmatic about her character's demise these days, saying, "It wasn't the way I wanted it, but I loved the way I went out."
Bryan Cranston thought killing his character early was a waste. Godzilla. News of Bryan Cranston stepping into the burgeoning monsterverse felt like the sort of move that would instantly add some credibility to the incoming 2014 Godzilla flick. However, those expecting to see Cranston leading the fight alongside the monstrous kaiju throughout were ultimately left to swallow the unwanted pill of his Joe Brody biting the dust halfway through the bloody feature. As the multiple-time Emmy winner would confess to IndieWire, it was a very successful movie. "I told him that even if I wasn't doing this role, that character shouldn't die at that point. It's just bad narrative." But they were too far down the road. Few would argue with Cranston's claims of his early demise being little more. Sean Bean has had enough of biting the dust. His future movies. Sean Bean has seemingly had it with being forced to kiss goodbye to the land of the living in character, with the last of his 23 TV and movie deaths coming in 2011's spoiler, first season of Game of Thrones. Sorry, but it's been a while. The Sheffield-born star finally decided enough was enough shortly after, and started to reject projects that involved his character being cut down during the runtime. And as Bean would confess back in 2019, "I turned down stuff. I've said, they know my character's gonna die because I'm in it. I just had to cut that out and start surviving, otherwise it was all a bit predictable." Folks have become so fond of dealing a fatal blow to Bean's on-screen personalities that the actor even recalled a time when he was asked to be killed off in a project, only to have his refusal be met with the hilarious comment of, "Well, can we injure you badly? Take what you can get, I suppose."
Nicolette Sheridan sued the show for being killed off. Nicolette Sheridan played the sassy, self-centered Edie Britt on Desperate Housewives, until the character was killed off in the show's 5th season when she crashed her car into an electric pole. Yet the story of Sheridan's exit from the show is a complicated and unsettling one, which ultimately led to her suing both series creator Mark Cherry and network ABC. The year after her death aired, Sheridan filed a $20 million lawsuit alleging that Cherry assaulted her on set, and when she reported this to ABC, they fired her in response, leading to this infamous death scene. ABC, however, claimed that they found no wrongdoing on Cherry's part. The other main cast members all threw their support Cherry's way, and the various charges declared by Sheridan were ultimately found to be without legal merit. Whichever side of the fence you fall down on here, it's clear that her death is mired in controversy, and Sheridan was less than thrilled at losing the gig.
Scarlett Johansson cried in the shower after learning of Black Widow's fate. Avengers Endgame. Having to let go of her beloved Natasha Romanoff at some point down the road was always going to be a difficult task for Scarlett Johansson. And sure enough, when the star was finally told by none other than Kevin Feige himself that her OG Avenger would be paying the ultimate price in the hero's endgame quest to bring back those snapped away by Thanos, Johansson admitted to Lab Bible that she was heartbroken about it. Now, the Marvel sensation would quickly follow that up by noting how "I think I took it like a champ" upon being delivered this life-altering revelation. Yet the star's understandable disappointment at being let off the Marvel Studios train ultimately led to a moment where, as she put it, "I cried in the shower later, but nobody saw that part." In the end, it turned out to be a case of simply goodbye for now, however, with Johansson finally being let loose in a Black Widow prequel shortly after her Vormir end.
McLean Stevenson left the set immediately after shooting MASH. Few death scenes in TV history have ever made the tectonic impact of Commanding Officer Lieutenant Colonel Henry Blake in the 3rd season of MASH. The episode Abyssinia Henry saw Henry be discharged and sent home to his wife and family, but the episode actually ended with the news that his plane was shot down over the Sea of Japan and that he didn't survive. Even with the show's expert melding of comedy and drama, it was a shocking, jarring moment. the execution of which ultimately left actor McLean Stevenson himself totally irate. Though Stevenson decided to exit the show himself during season 3, the show's producers decided to use this as an opportunity to teach viewers a harsh lesson in the random horrors of war. Worse still, they inflicted the same element of surprise upon the MASH cast, who only received the script page announcing Henry's death mere moments before they filmed it. This was done in an attempt to evoke realistically raw emotions from the tight-knit cast, and though it was certainly effective to that end, Stevenson was extremely upset by it. Stevenson, who was on set at the time the scene was being filmed, later admitted to being deeply hurt by the producers and their decision to bamboozle the cast like this. The news of Henry's death had such a mood-killing effect on the cast that an end-of-season party was cancelled, and Stevenson left the set as soon as filming was completed.
Mark Hamill felt hornswoggled by his conclusion, Episode 8, The Last Jedi. Mark Hamill evidently returned to the galaxy far, far away with the intention of getting stuck into a story that justified his Luke Skywalker's long-awaited return. Yet by the time the sequel trilogy had blasted off into hyperspace, Hamill's Jedi Master wound up only really acting as a significant presence in one of the 3 entries. With that, Episode 8 also housing his beloved Force user's unexpected and emotional demise too. And as Hamill himself would reveal to Den of Geek a few years back, the way Luke's arc developed in the time since he agreed to return left the legendary actor feeling a touch hornswoggled when all was said and done. As he put it, I thought, okay, you should push my death off to the last one. That's what I was hoping when I came back. No cameos and a run-of-the-trilogy contract. Did I get any of those things? Because as far as I'm concerned, the end of Episode 7 is really the beginning of Episode 8. I got one movie. They totally hornswoggled me. And he wasn't the only one who felt somewhat tricked over how much Hamill/Skywalker they were actually getting in these new chapters of the Skywalker saga.
Elizabeth Mitchell got drunk and cried for days. Lost. Elizabeth Mitchell gave a terrific performance on Lost as Dr. Juliet Burke, who quickly became a fan favourite character after being introduced in the show's 3rd season. Though originally intended for a short stint, her popularity ensured that she stuck around until close to the show's end. Juliet ultimately died at the start of season 6 after she detonated the Jughead hydrogen bomb. And though this wasn't the last we saw of Juliet, courtesy of the series' flash sideways shenanigans, the death still hit Mitchell like a ton of bricks all the same. In a 2009 interview, she said, "I cried for a couple of days. Evangeline Lilly and my sister came over and we drank until we fell asleep on the couch, which wasn't good because none of us are big drinkers. We woke up and said, let's do ice cream next time, okay?" Mitchell certainly landed on her feet post-Lost though, having been continually in demand ever since in shows such as V, Revolution, Once Upon a Time, and The Expanse.
James Phelps felt like a really close friend had died. The Deathly Hallows Part 2. Harry Potter star James Phelps was forced to deal with his unexpected dying bombshell in a far more unique way than most. On the day the final Potter book, The Deathly Hallows, had dropped worldwide in 2007, the Fred Weasley actor decided to pick up an English copy whilst doing some travelling in Japan. Then, as he'd eventually recalled to Metro, it soon became apparent that Fred wasn't making it out of this final novel or films alive. Needless to say, while sat on a speeding bullet train, the actor was a bit shell-shocked at this point. Hilariously, whilst trying his best to come to terms with the death of a character he didn't realise he'd become this attached to, as he put it, at the same time the ticket officer is coming around asking for tickets, and he just kind of prodded me saying, "Ticket, ticket." All I could do is look at him and I actually said, "Mate, come on, I've just died here. Let me have a bit of time to myself. Tickets wait for no dead wizard, mate."
Mia Kirshner refused to accept Jenny's death. The L Word. Groundbreaking LGBT TV series The L Word ended with its 6th season in 2009, and in its final season, one of the show's main characters, Jenny, was found dead in a swimming pool. While fans expected Jenny's murderer to be revealed by the show's end, The L Word signed off without ever giving audiences closure on the culprit. Though Mia Kirshner didn't sound off about Jenny's death at the time of the final season's airing, she did get vocal after 2019's spin-off series The L Word Generation Q made its debut. Early in the revival's first season, it's revealed that Jenny died not at the hands of another, but by killing herself, a revelation which many fans found to be anticlimactic, unsatisfying, and even downright offensive. And Kirshner herself counted herself among them, heading to Twitter to complain that Jenny, a sexual abuse survivor, deserved better. She even went so far as to outright reject the ending for Jenny, insisting that she isn't really dead. She said, "Nope, Jenny is not dead. That's not the story that needs to be told about a survivor of sexual violence. It's not a story that can be wrapped up and tied up with a bow. So no, no, she is not dead. I heard about her suicide today, and I feel sick that this is how they dismiss the story about a survivor of sexual assault. So no, she's not dead. While the showrunners might have a different take, you can't fault Kirshner's passion for her character so many years after the fact, and feeling that Jenny's death deserved a more meaningful explanation that veered away from tropes related to sexual abuse survivors.
Heather Donahue had to deal with being dead, The Blair Witch Project. There's no denying the impact found footage horror flick The Blair Witch Project had on the general movie-going public and the film industry as a whole upon its release back in 1999. However, what is often overlooked is just how much the game-changing smash hit altered one of the film's leading lights' life in the aftermath of its chilling arrival. In order to double down on the premise of this made-up tale being anything but as a way of stirring up interest, the film's marketing department decided to actually fake the death of Heather Donahue in the lead-up, a move that had some rather difficult consequences for the actor in real life. As Donahue would explain in an article for The Guardian, "My obituary was published when I was 24. It's a complicated thing to be dead when you're very much still alive and eager to make a name for yourself." The actor would ultimately decide to step away from acting in order to pursue a life of growing medical marijuana and producing the odd. Frank Grillo was pissed at Crossbone's early exit, Captain America: Civil War. He may not have been aboard the MCU's ship quite as long as Scarlett Johansson, but that still didn't stop Frank Grillo from feeling a little upset over the sudden big screen departure of his Brock Rumlow during Captain America: Civil War. A few years on from being blown to bits in that third Cap entry, Grillo would admit during a 2021 appearance on the Lights Camera Barstool podcast, the trajectory of Crossbones took a turn and he was out of the series really quickly, right? And I was a little pissed off about it because, you know, I signed a 7-picture deal with them. Now, it is worth noting how Grillo was ultimately given another vocal crack at Crossbones in the eventual 2021 What If animated series. And the ass-kicking star's words of Crossbones will live, I just don't know in what arena of the Marvel Universe yet, seem to suggest this secondary baddie is far from finished with our heroes.
Emma Caulfield was upset by Anya's death. Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Anya Jenkins was introduced in Buffy's 3rd season and quickly became a fan favorite, and as a result, many fans were left upset at her death in the show's very final episode, Chosen. A lot of fans felt that her death in the midst of the final battle was both unnecessary and lacked the fanfare that you'd expect for a long-tenured character. Caulfield's own view on her character's death are pretty complicated, because she herself actually asked Joss Whedon to write her out of the show at the end of the season, regardless of whether or not it was renewed for an 8th season, which ultimately it wasn't. Caulfield was ready to move on to something else. Though in a classic example of being careful what you wish for, Caulfield stated more recently that she was deeply dissatisfied with how her character went out. She said, "What I noticed about the finale was how little everybody cared that I died. I just think that's kind of lame."
Queen Latifah puts in a death clause after one death too many. Set it off. Similarly to Sean Bean, it seems as though Queen Latifah had been dealt one death too many back in the late 90s, to the point where the multi-talented performer decided to add a rather specific clause into her future contracts. On the back of being on the receiving end of a few deadly conclusions in the likes of Set It Off, Sphere, and The Bone Collector from 1996 to 1999, the actor would admit to Entertainment Tonight, "I noticed I was too good at it. So it's kind of a running joke. I was like, I don't get to do any sequels if I keep being this good at dying. So I said, look, you gotta put a no death clause in these contracts so they can't just kill me off like this. I'm never gonna get a sequel in." And though the star undoubtedly made light of the deadly situation during said interview, the fact Latifah felt the need to put it in writing that she'd no longer be forced to bite the dust in her subsequent projects tells the story of a star who was definitely fed up with being dispatched. That being said, the Oscar-nominated sensation would actually also admit, but I mean, of course, for the right price, you know, she dies. That is in the script, you know. So never say never if you got the dollar.